Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Thursday afternoon, post-lunch. I love getting post-lunch crowds because it's going to somewhere be between the I'm really excited and I've got food in my belly for the first time and forever, or it's the like everybody's going to nod off on this side of the room and then we'll see these people nod off on this side of the room and it'll be like a wave. So we'll see if we can get some sort of seventh-inning stretch or something going on there. So by way of introduction, my name is Andrew Bybee. I work on the Teams calling and meeting area. Been with the team for about 5 years, so been on this sort of wonderful journey that we think of as Microsoft Teams. Here to talk to you today about compliance recording, which seems like maybe a fairly sort of base topic, but actually has a lot of interesting aspects to it. So hopefully we'll be able to talk about that, and hopefully you're here to learn something about that as well. As just a short public service announcement, this is sort of session 4 of our learning path for today. For those of you that were planning on also attending session 5, which I will also be presenting, that originally was going to be in a different room, but we've managed to save you guys all the exercise because we figure you get enough walking for that. We're going to stay in here. So I will make sure to let the event staff that there was applause at the ability to stay here for that one. All right, so. Very happy to be here. I'm very happy to talk about what we're doing in this area around compliance recording. The work that we're doing here is really a sort of a larger set of, trying to help address the larger set of needs that we've got, not just from our perspective, but from a customer perspective, which is around how we blend communications and the work that you're doing, the sort of core interactions that you have in your organization around calling, around meeting, and really bring that into the workflow of running your organization or the customers that you're serving. And so we think about that workflow as mixing with that communications into something that's really business critical for you. And so when we talk about what we're doing in this space with financial services organizations or healthcare organizations, for example, those aspects of being able to capture those recordings and be able to make sure that they're getting treated in the appropriate regulatorily appliant way, bless you, is important. And so these are all sort of a set of things that we see the need for with Teams in our customers, but they span a sort of a collection of different categories. And so when we think about those things, we really think about these solutions that we're building with our partners around these areas as helping to drive sort of more impact for Microsoft 365 in your organization or in your customers that you're serving in their organizations. So when you're thinking about deploying calling and meetings, these solutions help you get even more value out of what you're buying and more usage out of what you're deploying to your users. But they also help you to reach every single role in the organization. So we certainly hear that every organization has a different set of needs. And as you're sort of thinking about deploying calling and meetings to those different needs, it's important that you can address not just the information worker that sits at the desk, but that you're addressing the trader or the analyst that happens to be sitting and dealing with a lot of different internal and external interactions in the company. And then finally, we see these as actually great opportunities for partners to help grow the ecosystem, but also to help reach a much wider set of audiences than we can even with sort of the basic core set of features in calling and meetings. So we're very excited about how we pull these category solutions together. And ultimately, we think this is about enabling these critical, business-critical workflows so that we can empower customers to actually move forward with calling and meetings and help them drive their digital transformation all the way through to the entire company. Now, as part of that, we've previously announced some category solutions around, for example, video interop, as well as data loss prevention. For those of you that may not have seen it earlier this week, we announced in a blog post for Teams and for Teams calling that we actually have an additional partner. So we had previously launched partnerships in CVI for Pexip, BlueJeans, and Polycom. We actually announced a new partnership with Cisco to bring them in as a cloud video interop provider, and also to be able to now introduce a new sort of modern way of what we think about modern interop for modern room systems that we'll be working on with Cisco and Zoom as part of that. So these are important categories for us, and you can see even with some of the established ones, we continue to move these things forward. So think of that sort of in mind as we now sort of talk about these next couple over this session and the following, where with compliance recording and contact center, these are important areas for your business, and we want to make sure that we're actually helping you move your business forward with these solutions. And as part of that, then, there's just going to rely on a set of capabilities that are actually underneath the sort of the cover, so to speak, with our communications platform. and also some of the templates and scenarios that you're able to provide. And so one of the other scenarios that we also talked about here was with virtual consults. This is the ability to do trusted video visits using Microsoft Teams and using Teams meetings as sort of the foundation for a video-first communication with an external consultant, patient, teacher, student, whatever it happens to be. So as we go forward and we talk about compliance recording, just recognize that these things are all part of this core same model and infrastructure, which is if you're going to think about virtual consults, think about virtual consults with recording, right? To be able to capture those patient interactions. And when you think about contact center, think about the ability to route those incoming virtual consults in a more dynamic way. So we really see these as, again, helping to move your organization forward and really capture sort of all the opportunity with 365. So that's sort of the pitch around category solutions. When we get to the contact center stuff here in about an hour, you'll just know that we're in that sort of same vein. But now, let's sort of dive in and let's talk about this. Now, with compliance recording, I usually like to start with a taxonomy. Now, this taxonomy may not sound very exciting to you, but it's actually really important for the rest of the conversation that we're going to have. How many of you have actually used a Teams meeting and a recording of a Teams meeting at some point in the last year? All right, good. Most of you have show of hands, so that's awesome. So that ability for you to say, hey, I would like to record this meeting, we think of that as a convenience recording. It's basically at your behest. So you get to record it. When you're done with it, you get to choose where it goes, and you get to sort of control how you want to share it, what you're going to do with it. Now, how many of you have actually participated or generated a live event with Teams in the last year? Okay, a little bit less, but still more than I would have expected maybe. So great opportunity here from a feature capability to use live events. Now live events, one of the coolest things that it has is the ability to pause live video, to go back, right, video on demand, and then to go forward again. But in order to have all that cool capability, you've got to record it. So obviously, both convenience recording and live events are capabilities that we've delivered out of the box with Microsoft Teams. And those are core aspects of what we think the life cycle of meetings are about, right? The ability to remember and to go back to it. Now, there's a third aspect here, which is when we think about now, it's really not your decision to record. It's actually a requirement to record the conversation from a policy or a regulatory perspective. And for the purposes of this taxonomy, we're going to think about that as organizational recording. Now, the reason that we get into this is there's a sort of little side eddy here that I want to just talk about briefly. When we're doing Teams meetings and you're hitting that convenience recording or using a live event, we are handling those things in a compliant way. So I just want to be upfront about that. Those meetings are going into stream, they're getting handled correctly, you can find them in Security and Compliance Center. So when I talk about compliance, everything that we're handling for you out of the box with meetings, we're doing in a compliant way. However, there is another set of capabilities though, which is I want to be able to actually control who I'm going to record, and I want to do that automatically, and I, as the admin, want to be able to decide that based on regulation or policy for that user or group. That is organizational recording, and that's what we're going to spend the rest of the time talking about today. Last little eddy, lawful intercept. This is not an area that we're going to talk about right now. There are some folks in the room that may be thinking, hey, this is great, compliance recording, can I surveil all of my employees silently? That is not what this feature is about, so if you would like to do that, we will have a different conversation about that at some other point. All right, so taxonomy out of the way. Now let's talk a little bit about sort of what goes into organizational recording. How many of you are doing some type of compliance recording in your organization today? Okay, that's good, so you're in the right session, so that's a good start. Now, with that, why? Now, for those of you that are doing it, these probably look familiar. For those of you that aren't, this might be new to you. It's not just because I want to stick it in the digital equivalent of the file drawer, right? There is a need to be able to go back to it for things like legal hold and potential legal cases down the road. But there are also other opportunities here to be able to look at it from a security perspective and to be able to think about it from a workforce engagement perspective. So as we think about how recordings start to play into how I help my employees get better, there's actually a bunch of opportunity here. Now this starts to, again, blend into more of the contact center space, but how many of you have had a call and had it say, this call may be recorded for quality assurance purposes? Just about, come on, everybody's made a call at some point, right? So with that call, that is effectively what's happening, right? It's part of the process and the practice to be able to then understand, what have you said, how effective was that, and how can we help you be more effective as you go forward? So these are examples of solutions that are being built on top of this asset of a recording. So it's not just about sticking it in the digital equivalent of a drawer, but it's also about helping the organization to improve end to end. Now, to do that, there's a set of capabilities that you need, and you need to understand, how and when you're going to choose to record. You need to have the mechanics of being able to do the recording. You need to be able to know where you need to put these things and how you're going to manage them. Retention policy is a huge aspect of this. And then being able to generate those insights and kind of the workflows of tooling around those are all sort of important elements to be able to put these things together. Now, in order to sort of manage this together, then we also have gone out and we've talked about, okay, so great, given those goals and sort of that need, how do you now start to think about when I'm trying to deploy this, or if I'm a partner working with someone trying to deploy this, how should I be thinking about this? What is the right fit? So there's some interesting data points that have come back based on some of the research and the interviews and roundtables that we've done over the last 18 months or so. One of them is that, interestingly enough, most of the people in an organization actually don't necessarily need to get recorded. Now, why would that be? Well, it turns out that, in fact, one of the core requirements is people that are, for example, in a financial institution having sales-related conversations about a sales transaction with an external customer, those you got to record. The accounts of the conversation between the two people in the back office that are basically talking about sort of what are they going to do for lunch, don't necessarily have to worry about that. But when the guy who's doing the sales transaction talks to the person in the back office that's then processing that sales transaction, does that need to be recorded or not? Well, it turns out it depends. So now in that particular case, what you have is I'll say an intermingling of need. So you might say, hey, well, let's just deploy Teams calling a meeting to the people that don't need compliance recording and we'll be good. But if you're the organization, you can't just do piecemeal because you don't know who's going to talk to whom and when. So you in fact need to make sure that you can address all the users in the organization. So it's critical to every aspect of the deployment, from the planning to the rollout to who's getting devices, who's not getting devices, et cetera. The other thing that we've seen is that everyone comes from somewhere. There are very few companies that are sort of in the need of this type of compliance obligation that don't have some type of system in place already for being able to do recording and some type of system for being able to do calling. And so whether you're coming from Skype for Business Server, whether you're coming from a Cisco, Mitel, Avaya, some other legacy PBX that you haven't replaced in 30 years, any of these situations, you've had to come up with some type of recording scheme for that. And as much as you might be excited about Teams calling and meetings, you've got to have a plan to make sure that you continue to record all the conversations that need to be recorded while you're moving to calling and meetings. So that continuity is very, very, very important. And as companies have started to reach out beyond calling, they also need to make sure that they're continuing to capture things that are even outside of Teams calling and meetings. So whether it's social, whether it's Facebook, whether it's SMS, there are sort of different ways that they need to be able to capture those types of interactions. So there's a much broader need for capture here than just you moving to calling and meetings. Now the other area here, and this is the one that I find personally kind of fascinating because it seems a little bit of a Gordian knot, maybe, to use that term. Really the situation here is I will ask customers and I'll say, well, how much do you record today? We'll say, well, we record everything that we have to record. Okay. So if people are going to start having video on in their meetings, are you going to record video? He's like, only if I have to. Well, but if you don't have to, then are you going to actually record it? No, we'll turn it off. So what you run into is this sort of demand to say, hey, we're just going to turn off video because we don't want to have to record it. And I say, well, why is it that you don't want to record video? Well, because the regulators haven't asked for it, and I don't want to store it because if I store it, then they're going to ask for it. Okay, that's interesting. So you kind of want to just go back to the Stone Age and let's just communicate via drums, and then that way nothing's getting captured maybe. So we want people to move forward with video. We think Teams is a great experience. It's even better with video. We think it's more personal. It actually helps drive that transformation. So we want you to be able to turn on video, but we also then have to understand what does that do for storage? What does that do for retention? How do you manage all of that video content then, and what do you do with it? Right? How do you know more because you have video that you're capturing? And at the same time, you've also got to think about all the sort of privacy implications that come from now having even more signals around video. So we recognize that there's some tensions there, and so we want to help resolve those tensions with our partners as we bring these solutions to bear. Part of that is making sure that when we go forward and we think about the story, many of the sort of systems and the customers that are the deepest in this area today have basically done it with on-premises infrastructure. I talked with one customer. They have 600 servers just to run their recording infrastructure. 600 servers. They didn't even have that many servers for their communications infrastructure. So it's 600 servers for their recording infrastructure. I think we can do better. So we believe that there's a story here about how the cloud can help actually move this experience forward and really help you untie this Gordian knot, so to speak, and really help you actually get to the right kind of balance of security, regulation, cost, and actually impact and efficiency and transformation that comes from being able to capture this type of information. So that's great, Andy. Thank you for the lecture. What are we doing? So with Teams, it's our interest to be able to actually help our customers have a seamless, high-quality recording experience. As I mentioned, we do recording already in the product for convenience and for functional recording for things like live events. We want to make sure that the recording that we're introducing for compliance purposes is equally as seamless. We also want to make sure that we're addressing some of those customer needs in terms of getting to the cloud and helping you manage sort of all that storage that comes with it. And we want to make sure that it's well integrated with the rest of the policy sets of tools and administrative experiences that we're using inside of Teams that we've been talking about sort of earlier today. Ultimately, we also feel this is part of our sort of advanced communications value, and so we do see this as an important element of our phone system story and how we can actually tell a more value story with E5 to put these things together. So how does this actually work? So effectively, I am user A. When I am user A, I'm going to place a call, or it could be joining a meeting, so we'll sort of interchange the verbs as appropriate. Now, when I do that, this is where some of the magic starts to happen. So we've done work under the covers to actually now, in our core calling infrastructure, when I see this, I'm going to do a couple of things new. So one of those things that's new is I'm actually going to go and I'm going to check our policy store. And in that policy store, I'm going to determine whether or not this is supposed to be a recorded user or not. If it is a recorded user, then that will basically come back and it will tell me which recorder I'm supposed to use. Now, there's a couple of things that I just said that I want to just make sure caught your attention. Number one, I get to choose different recorders for different people. And number two, I get to choose different recorders for my company all up. So that ability to actually stipulate different recorders and different people is really important because it now means that this isn't about you having to now deploy different recorders into your on-premises server pools like you might have in Skype for Business. This is now you being able to take advantage of the cloud communications platform, Foundation, and Azure to be able to now bring in these recorders in a flexible way on a per-user basis. Now, with that policy check done, I'm now going to take that recorder identification, and I'm now going to effectively auto-invite that recorder. Now, what in the world is an auto-invite? That seems like a weirdly technical, non-technical term. So an auto-invite basically is about what you might think, which is when I'm going to now decide which recorder is going to get brought in, we have the ability in our communications infrastructure to invite, to send a request to join this conversation to a bot, to this media service that is now joining. And in the process of doing that, this thing is now going to get a set of information about who placed the call and other metadata about the sort of communication that was starting to happen. And it's now going to join the call. Now, the natural question that you then ask is, well, does this happen before user B gets the call or after user B gets the call? And the short answer is it happens before. And this means that the recorder is available and present in the conversation at what we think of as time zero. Not the beginning of all time, but at least the beginning of the time for this conversation. So once that happens, then the call can go through and user B now receives the ring. And as far as the user B is concerned, this is no different than any other conversation. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, ultimately, user B sees an incoming call from user A. They do not see the recorder in the conversation. They do not see that it is a three-party conversation. They just see that it is a normal call. Transfer still works. Everything still works the exact same way that it's supposed to. Now, this has involved a bunch of work and changes under the covers in the infrastructure, but again, the intent and the desire is to give you a seamless experience for your users and to make it clear and easy for you as an administrator running these services how these things are supposed to be participating. Now, once that recorder is getting joined, this is where the other part of the magic happens. So now, there are some models where, in fact, you could say, hey, the recording was done. I'm going to stick it in a place, and I'm going to tell the partner to go and grab the recording out of the recording store. And those types of models exist, and there's some value to them. But we also recognize that especially with these higher value solutions, that in fact there is real value that comes from being able to actually have real-time access to the media. So with real-time access to the media, this now means that the partner and their service can now start to actually engage in decisions around policy, where the file should be going, what other sort of tooling or workflow gets enabled as part of that, and what other sort of insights you can now start to generate for this. Because now once you have access to the media, now we unlock the rest of the value around all of our Azure services, cognitive services, the ability to investigate video, to do audio recognition, speech to text, text to speech. All of these things now start to become value propositions that you can now bring into the recording. And as we go forward, we recognize that there are a lot of opportunities where, in fact, people want to be able to work across both the sort of video and calling enabled workflows that these partner solutions are enabling today, along with the sort of document and message capture solutions that we're driving inside of Security and Compliance Center for Office 365. And so we expect that as we go forward, these solutions will continue to improve and integrate their flows together. But we also recognize that there's a lot of unique value that's coming out of these video and calling scenarios that our partners are able to drive and deliver for you guys now. So this model allows you to get the best of the partner solution and the best of the Teams and meeting calling side together. Now, with that, that's a bunch of talk. We're about halfway through. So now let's take a look at what this starts to look like. These are early builds. See if we can switch this guy over. All right, so what am I showing you? I'm showing you a Teams client with one appointment in it. Woohoo! Done. Yay. Done it. All right, so in this case, what I'm going to do is this is a user. Now, this user has had that policy applied to it. Now, what should that translate to? Well, the experience itself is not super dramatic. I'm going to go ahead and join this meeting that I have scheduled. And you'll notice that as I join, it's going to go ahead and connect. And now that I've connected, you'll notice that I get this, hey, recording has started. The call is being recorded for quality assurance purposes. Did I hit the record button? No. Did I see any sort of different thing? Not necessarily, just the notification. Now, the other thing is how many people are in the roster, right? Now, this bug is not a bug, because ultimately that test calling user, that's me. Now, what I did see is I have another person that got invited, which was my account on another organization. And you'll notice that if I join in, I'm also now going to get a similar notice because I'm not under policy, but someone that is in the meeting is under policy. So I need to know that, in fact, the meeting's getting recorded, even though I'm not necessarily getting recorded. Now, project this forward. I could be in a meeting. I could have 5 different people in the meeting with 5 different recorders from 5 different companies. So now the natural question that you're going to ask me is where does the recording go? There's actually a recording for each individual, and that recording goes back to their organization. And it goes to their organization in the geography that's manipulated by the partner and by the organization itself. This means that this classic case that you might see where, in fact, you say, if I'm under a compliance policy, I can't join anybody's meetings. I have to host all the meetings, and everybody has to come to me. This model now lets you actually join other people's meetings on Teams, and you can still make sure that all the compliance information is being captured in the appropriate organization. We think that's going to be a huge step forward. Now, the other thing you'll notice here is that it says I've now got 2 sort of notifications. The second one is because this is a test bot. And so for the purposes of testing, it actually is turning on recording and turning off recording on a scheduled basis. Now, the reason that this is here is to show you that if this recorded person was to leave, for example, or if it was determined that it didn't need to record this conversation, it would let you know and say, hey, we've actually stopped recording. Now, this gives you an example of, hey, it's doing video, it's able to capture this, I'm able to do notifications, all these things effectively sort of come together. And so that's great, that's a meeting. Now, in addition to that, the other thing that I want to sort of mention here is that if I was making a call, you'll notice that I could actually go ahead and try this out. Now, one proviso here, this test plan doesn't have international calling access. So what we're going to actually do is we're going to call the operator that's going to tell us that we don't have international calling access. And that's OK. It's not a bad voice or anything like that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to call the Microsoft main number. Now, I want you to notice two things.
Couldn't complete the call. Please check the number and try again.
Now, do you notice the recording started?
Contact your admin.
So I was placing a call. It connected me to the call. I got the operator. And it told me that, in fact, I was going to start recording on that operator. Now, so I did a call. I didn't have to do anything else. But it works for meetings. It works for calling. But there was something else I just showed you. And I want to see if anybody guessed what I just showed you. We announced it earlier. I just showed you calling in Chrome. By the way, so we actually announced this earlier in the fall, but we think that it's important that people understand that this is actually something that you can do now. So in addition to being able to join your team's meetings, if you have phone system, you'll actually be able to do calling from inside of your browser as well. All right. So hopefully that gives you a sense of kind of some of the basic parts of the experience. So what did I just show you? So number one, I showed you notification experiences. Now I showed you the web, and some of you that might be more discerning might say, but Andy, what about all these other things that you have down in the Expo Hub that are very cool, right? About all these phone devices, and what about Teams rooms, and what about the mobile phone, and all that goodness that we're all looking forward to using? Yep, works there too, right? Same type of experience. You're going to get the notifications. So it's going to be the same notifications on mobile. It's going to be the same notifications on Teams rooms, web, desktop, all of these things. Consistent notifications that are being managed by the experience. Now, the other aspect of this is in looking and saying, hey, in fact, I have other types of endpoints that can join into Teams meetings. For example, I have these wonderful SIP phones that are sitting on my desk that I got 4 years ago that I can still sort of dial in for audio conferencing at least. Are those going to work? So part of the experience here is actually being able to play you audio notifications. So much in the same way that we can play you audio notifications when you join the conference, that same announcement service is actually also able to then notify callers around the recording activation inside of a call or a meeting itself. So it's handling both the visual and the audio notices together. And it's doing that in a seamless way. And it's all, again, based off of that communication foundation. So as the recorder is joining, it's communicating and letting the service know, this is how it's happening. I'm now recording. Please let everybody else know. So that notification is a key aspect of that. Now, with that platform work, this is the other sort of piece that we're very excited to sort of bring forward, which is on top of the communication APIs that we released this time last year, basically. We've now introducing some enhancements for recording specifically. And so these enhancements are in both the core APIs as well as some enhancements to our different SDKs. So we have a calling SDK, we have a media SDK. And to do these things, this basically allows you to now get this additional information, these events and properties that allow you to actually support these different scenarios. So who was the call from? Who transferred the call? All of these types of information that you want to be able to collect as part of your recorder to now be able to make this happen. Now, once you've done this work, this is the work that our partners are doing, and this allows you to now actually deploy these types of services into your organization. So when you do that, you're going to need to have an administrative permission, right? These are highly trusted services. Now, they're not going on front-end pools like they might have been in Skype for Business, but they are accessing all the communications in your organization. So this is definitely something that your administrator is going to want to have permissions over. And when you do that, then it allows you to basically get access to these streams and permissions that you see here. So group calls and meetings, sign in, the ability to now actually get access to the media stream. So these are new permissions that we've published that allow you to actually get access to this information. Now, the other part of this, and this is really, this is fun, is group policy. Now, I talked about sort of integrating these experiences together. So most of the work that we've seen when we talk about this is about add change. So if an employee starts, I want to be able to set the policy. If an employee leaves, I want to be able to remove the policy. Sometimes if employees change roles, I want to be able to sort of change, potentially turn it off if they move from a compliant role to a sort of a non-compliant required role. So we've integrated this now with PowerShell. So you have new PowerShell app commandlets for Teams that allow you to basically set the application instance. So this is basically how your recorder is going to show up in the organization. It allows you to actually now map that to an identity. And then once you've done that, it allows you to basically create what is a new policy. So this is a new compliance policy that basically allows you to stipulate this is a type of setting. So the same way that Jamie probably talked about some of the policy work here. So I'm stipulating effectively a default setting, and I can apply this default setting to types of users. And once I've now created that default setting, I can go ahead and do the apply. And so when I do the apply, or the grant in this particular case, what I net out with is hey, if I go and look at this user, I can see that for this user that has this recorder assigned to it, and via this policy. Now, that's a bunch of under the cover stuff. You're going to do that once, maybe. You're going to do that sort of through an add change process, so you're definitely going to want to automate that via PowerShell. But once you do that, you get all the seamless experiences, and all those things basically just work from a Teams perspective. Now, with this, the other thing that we've done then is that we are now moving forward with partners. Earlier this year, we talked about some important ability to have partner solutions in this space. And so with that, we're also making sure that we can help address the sort of core questions and needs and interests that organizations have around security and compliance. And so that's part of what's driving our introduction of a new Certified for Teams program for compliance recording solutions. And so this Certified for Teams program will include a set of security and compliance evaluation of partner services and their Teams applications, and the ability to then really understand sort of how these services are running so that we can jointly support you in the best possible way. So the APIs are going to be available as part of the beta, but we certainly are encouraging customers to really look at this Certified for Teams program as a key umbrella to really make sure that you're getting some of the highest quality solutions out there. And as part of that, then we also have a set of initial partners that we're working with which includes the ones that you see here on the screen. So we're excited about bringing these folks together with us and with you to really help make sure that we can get the most out of the calling and meeting experience for these organizations. And we're also very excited that these partners are making good progress, and we're expecting to see broader customer availability in early new year. So this is going to be a great reason to then start moving forward and start thinking about how you can go farther with calling in meetings in even some of these most stringent types of environments. And the last piece that I would mention on this is because we're sort of at this particular stage, some of you may start asking questions of your local field reps or your local channel reps, saying, "Hey, I went to this conference and they talked about this stuff, and like, what do you got for me?" So we're working hard to make sure that everybody's getting up to speed and can sort of speak to it. But I would just urge you, if you have questions, please make sure that you're getting those sent through. But we're continuing to expand that, and we hope that by the time that we are ready to really sort of broaden the doors in the early new year, that everybody's going to be ramped up and ready to go. So we're excited and looking forward to 2020 as a way to really get going on these things. So with that, we've got about 10 minutes left of time here. I want to just, if there's any sort of Q&A, there are mics here and here if you want. And I'll give people 2 seconds for that, or I will stick around because now we're in the same room, for any questions that people might have. Yeah, so I think most everybody was here, but the next session that we're going to do is going to be around Contact Center. And so that will be at 3:15 in this room, yeah, as we mentioned before. And so I'm happy to take questions now or sort of in the break between the other ones. I'm not seeing anybody rush to the microphones. So with that, I will just sort of provide the obligatory here. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, now 2 questions. You guys popped up. Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't see who came first, so.
No problem. So we do have folks that want to use their phones for personal calls that don't need to be recorded. So if you have them in a policy that records all the time, is there a way to allow them to turn off the recording before they join a meeting?
Yeah, that's great. So the question I think is if so when I'm saying you're using my personal phone, you're saying like my personal device, or you're saying my Teams client?
So basically their Teams client is record always, right? It's for compliance recording, like MiFID or something like that. And if they want to make a personal phone call from that phone, how do they do that without it recording first?
Yeah, so so if I'm using the Teams client, but I am making a call that's not necessarily compliance related.
Exactly.
Got it. So great question. So ultimately, the policy that you saw me stipulate here is really a policy to invite the recorder. The recorder itself actually has an additional set of checks that it's making to decide whether to actually record or not. And so each of the partners will have different types of schemes for what they'll allow in terms of flexibility. So they might inspect the outbound number, for example, and say, oh yeah, that's not a number I'm worried about, or that's not a participant I'm worried about. So I think that will be the starting point. I think beyond that, that's a good conversation to sort of think about if there are some other cases that we want to try and support. Good question, though. Yeah, I'm sorry.
So in a meeting that you're recording, and if you go into an executive session, so you're pausing or doing whatever, is there a way to customize what that looks at the recording to when it's complete, or is that like, what does that look like when they move into an executive session?
When you say executive session, you mean like I'm like holding the meeting, or?
Yeah. So one of our compliances is, because we're a state-funded organization, all our board meetings need to be recorded.
Got it.
And then they'll pull themselves into an executive, they call it an executive session, where they stop the recording and
yeah.
So how does that look, I guess?
In terms of being able to start or stop the recording itself?
That, and then what does it look like aesthetically? Like I mean, is that where you can customize that and say, meeting being stopped because of executive session, or if we had a message on there due to compliance, blah, blah, blah.
Got it. So one of it's a question of control. The other is a question of kind of configuring appearance and kind of messaging and things. Yeah. So both of those are things that we would look for the partner to be able to facilitate, because again, they're the ones that are controlling kind of the net decision about whether to actually record or not. We do have some features for being able to do more customization over the notification and the notices in our backlog for something that's coming up. Yep. So I'm sorry, question?
Yeah, you mentioned analytics and insights as things that occur after the call's been recorded.
Yeah.
Are they going to be provided by the Office 365 Compliance Center, or would they be provided by the partner solutions?
Great question. So for these types of calls and meetings that are being captured by the partner solution, the partners have a ton of value that they're offering in that particular space.
Like
so that would be the first place to look.
Like caller sentiment, things like that.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. Great question. Yeah.
So the flow you showed was kind of like an outbound call. So you got agent makes the call, connects with the bot, then connects with the B party.
Yep.
Does it work the other way as well? So you got an incoming call, recording. Then it hooks the bot in and records the rest, or?
Yeah, so it does work for both inbound and outbound in terms of being able to do audio notices. So if you get a call, like if a PSTN caller was calling you, PSTN caller would get the notice as part of connecting to you. Yeah, good question. Yeah.
How do you handle advanced e-discovery for like finding stuff that is discussed during a recording in multiple languages?
Got it. So I think the question is how am I, once the recording has been captured, how am I finding topics of interest inside of the recording?
Yeah.
Yeah. So those would be provided as part of the analytics tools. Different partners have different sets of capabilities. So I encourage you to check out the partners and see kind of what they've got in play. Most of them have some type of ability to search through and do recording. So yeah, I would take a look at those.
So there are no plans to add that to the advanced e-discovery of Office 365?
Well, we have a set of those for the recordings that you're already capturing yourself. So if you do recordings, we send it to Stream. Stream already does indexing, transcription, et cetera. So you can look and search for topics based on the transcript, right? But those are recordings that effectively you've controlled. So
yeah, but that is only in a couple of languages, right?
There are some constraints in terms of languages, but those are kind of changing on an ongoing basis. So, and I think so I would look at the ones that we have for Stream if you're capturing your own meetings, and then the partners have a set of capabilities for that as well.
Okay.
Good question. Yeah.
Hi. Is it possible to policy control the notifications, the audio and visual notifications?
Question is it possible to policy control the notifications? Short answer is yes. There are some controls about how you want sort of the notifications or how frequently. But we can get into details on that as we go forward. But short answer is yes.
Okay, and does that mean the bot that you're inviting won't show anywhere, or?
Yeah, so the bots, once the recorders are joined, they basically, when they stipulate themselves as recorders, they're not shown anywhere else in the experience. And so there are ways for you to be able to control kind of how much notification. I'll just go back to my opening statement. Not intended as a total surveillance tool necessarily, but you do have some control over sort of how much notice is being given. Good question. All right, I'm sorry, yes.
What if I set up the media bypass of direct route? Is it working?
Great question. Media bypass for direct routing. So this is a great drill down topic. So the short answer is if you set up media bypass for direct routing, you're basically saying, I don't want my media to go outside of the SBC. And the recording that we're doing here is all in the cloud, which is why you were able to see me do a recording even though I was running a browser solution there. So in that particular situation, we believe that the answer is going to be that media still has to go out over the cloud for that particular conversation. So it's not you're never going to do media bypass, and it's not you're always going to the cloud, but for the calls that have to be recorded, you would have to go to the cloud.
So we need to turn off media bypass in order to use compliance.
It could be recorded at the SBC. So this is where, again, we're going to start getting into some very specific topics. So I would say, network configuration is definitely something to spend a little bit more time on based on your needs to look at that. The core constraint that I would say is because we are doing the recording in the cloud, that the media has to go to the cloud for that particular conversation.
I have other questions. Second question is that what if I make a hold and a transfer to someone? How does the call recording file looks like? Two files or one file?
Yeah, great question. So each call. So how do I handle transfers? Is I think the basic question.
Yes.
So basically, each transfer leg is considered a new call to evaluate, and so the recorder would effectively get re-invited to the new leg, and then make a determination about whether to continue recording or not. There are a set of properties that you can inspect, and that, from a recorder perspective, you would then basically put together like a transfer chain. So you'd be able to see like this call went to this call, went to this call. But in general, it's basically 2 recordings for that simple scenario.
What if I make a hold and on-hold? It's one string of the file.
Hold and on-hold is not 2. To hold and on-hold would still be 1 recording.
Okay. And the last question, maybe you already mentioned, but I missed it maybe. What is the necessary licenses for this feature?
The license requirements for the region?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this work around being able to enable this policy will be something related to either having a phone system license or E5.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So I'm sorry, you were very patient. Thank you.
What about archiving and retention rules? Is that handled through Teams or is it handled through a partner solution?
Great question. So the core retention and archiving policies are integrated with the partner solutions today for the medias that they're capturing. We have some conversations that were going on about sort of how we can help to streamline some of that. So like if you start a legal hold, for example, in Security and Compliance Center, is there a way of sort of propagating that or somehow instigating that with a partner solution? That falls into that category of like things that we think will continue to sort of improve. But for right now, there'll be flows on sort of both sides. The one piece that I would add there is keep in mind that in a lot of these cases, especially for organizations that already have these types of solutions, they already have a workflow and a process set up to basically go and do legal hold for media like that. That's already separate from Security and Compliance Center. So you'll still be able to see all the meetings. So like all the meeting metadata and call metadata, you'll still be able to get from Security and Compliance Center. It's just if you want to actually do some of those holds over the media side of it on the partner side. But
great. What about for countries like Germany with GDPR and some of the other regulatory bodies? How do you set up the instance so that you're locked down within that country?
Great question. So if I'm using one of the local sort of sovereign countries, or how am I making sure that I'm getting the media stored in the right place? Yeah, so we've been talking through that. The partner solutions basically have different schemes for being able to store to local archives. Some of those archives are in fact, providing different types of flexibility. So some will be in the cloud. Some can actually propagate that to your local, maybe in an on-prem deployment. So there's some flexibility there that the partners are providing. That'll be a per partner choice as to how much flexibility. So I would say in that market, that's something to take a look at. Yeah.
Is there any native, or do you know of any partner solution to include full screen recording?
Full steering recording.
Full screen recording.
Oh, full screen recording. So all of the recording solutions that we're working with are going to be working for audio, video, and screen sharing that are coming through Teams.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking more for like in a contact center for training purposes, where people are moving back and forth between different applications.
Got it. So you're talking more like desktop recording, like tracking like the actual things that they're doing while they're on the screen. That's a good question. I'm not sure, but I can follow up on that one for you.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, last question.
So I wanted to hook on to the earlier question about the direct routing and direct media.
Yeah.
If you have a Teams call, which is being recorded, it will usually have direct media between the clients.
Yes.
So now if you're going to record your whole organization for purposes, all calls will always go to the cloud.
If you choose to do that, yes. I mean, based on the research, I guess what we've seen, that tends to be a smaller percentage. You might be in that percentage. But yeah, effectively, because the calls are going to the cloud, the media is going to the cloud, there will obviously be a little bit of a difference in terms of the media path. But given the other work that we're doing, we believe that that's still going to be a pretty solid experience for the folks that have that policy set up.
Yeah, okay, and just to make it clear, so the recording device is always in the cloud. It can never be on-prem and sort of synced down?
Yeah, so great question. So where is the recording device located? So the core recorders in terms of this core program are going to be in Azure and consuming directly from our media processor in the cloud. There are additional options that folks have. So some of our partners, for example, have SBC recorders, so they'll capture at the edge. And some partners have client-based recorders where they're doing like media packet sort of pull off directly from the device. So again, this is where mileage will vary a little bit, but depending on your needs, it's something to take a look at.
Yeah, so basically when you're recording the meeting with video and everything, it's always going to be in the cloud?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. All right, so we're over time. Bunch of other sessions we've been walking through. You guys were here for a number of those. The last piece I will have is around making sure that if you have been thinking about going from Skype for Business to Teams, we have a bunch of experiences that have been happening. You can also go and check out our work around upgrade workshops. If you've been wondering about devices, a bunch of good stuff around devices. And we also have an interesting promo going on, so if you wanted to get sort of a nice little discount off of devices, then you can use the promo code to get that going. So I'll be back in half an hour in the same rooms. We'll talk about contact center. That'll be fun. But thanks for showing up, and I hope to see you guys here in a little bit.